Hello, Thalia United Methodist family and friends. March is the last time we've been able to worship together inside our sanctuary. I'm sure you miss the fellowship of meeting in person for worship as much as I have. We have Mark McKinney from the Healthy Church team to answer questions about what's been happening and the plan to resume in-person worship. Mark?
Hello, Diane. Thank you very much for having me tonight. I'm happy to be here to speak on behalf of the Healthy Church team and about things that are going on here at Thalia Church.
Thank you for being here. Mark, please tell us what the HCT team is and what the team is doing on behalf of Thalia United Methodist Church.
Sure. Well, I'm sure as most people know, our Bishop, Sharma Lewis, from the Virginia Conference, asked each congregation, each individual church in the Virginia Conference, to come up with a Healthy Church team. That makes up members of the congregation who have different expertise, longtime members of the congregation, to come together. And the goal of the Healthy Church team was to come up with protocols and safety measures that will allow us to provide a way for us to get back to meeting in person, worshiping in person, and utilizing the ability to come face to face for fellowship once again.
What are some of the things that's been happening since we've been away from in-person worship at Thalia?
Well, there's been a lot going on here, even though we haven't been in the building. As a lot of people probably remember, there was a plan for a long time to do renovations and some remodeling of the sanctuary. And so when we got out of the building, the construction workers were able to get in there. And when we do come back, people will be, I think, amazed and happy with the way the sanctuary looks now. So it wasn't all bad that we were gone for a little while. But more importantly, we've still been able to meet. I want to say a personal thank you to Pastor Joe and members of the worship team, both the contemporary team and the traditional folks, for being able to get together and put out online worship services for us each Sunday. We really haven't missed worship here at the United Methodist Church because of the tools that they've been able to use, and we've been able to join them on Sunday mornings for a worship experience, though not here physically.
How is the HCT team organizing a safe way for us to return to in-person worship?
Well, we are fortunate that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, okay? We have some folks that have expertise. We have people with medical backgrounds on the team, for example. And we have the guidance of all the governmental entities, whether it be the CDC, the Virginia Department of Health. We have the programs that have been put out by the governor and the protocols that have been put out by the CDC that we can follow as we build a plan for Thalia specifically. We also have the benefit of the Virginia Conference. We're a connectional church, and Bishop Lewis asked some churches to be guinea pigs of sorts. Those churches agreed to come back a little bit sooner than everybody else and try things out. This pandemic is new to everybody. None of us have experienced anything like this in our lifetimes before. Those churches kind of came back together and are telling the rest of us, hey, this worked, something that didn't work. And we have all of those resources to try and get together and put together a plan that's unique because no true churches are the same. We have a different facility, we have a different makeup of our congregation, but put into place using those overall guidelines a specific plan for Thalia United Methodist Church.
Wow, that's a lot of information and a lot of resources. I'm just wondering how the HCT is using all that information to help Thalia.
Well, the Healthy Church team has to take all of the resources that we have, all the information that we have, and put that into a plan, a written plan. That plan is submitted to our district superintendent, Wayne Sneed, here in the Elizabeth River District, because he has to approve it. Now, we've gone over the plan, we've changed the plan, we've prayed on it, and we've tweaked it. But that plan has been submitted to our district superintendent, and he may have some questions. He may have some changes that he suggests when it comes back. But that plan has been submitted to him, and once it's approved, then it will come back to us to implement, which is really the more important part, frankly. As you may recall, we put out a survey in July to the congregation, and thank you to everyone who responded to that. We had a great many responses, more frankly than I expected. To get a feel from the congregation about what they want when we come back. How do they feel safe? When we did that, it kind of opened up some of our eyes to the uniqueness of what we have. For example, here at Thalia, we have a fairly aging population in our congregation. And part of the plan that we have is going to call for cleaning. Obviously, people know that cleaning and re-cleaning is part of what we have to do wherever you go now. Washing hands, cleaning surfaces, things of that nature. Our plan calls for a group of volunteers because it can't be just one person. We need a group of volunteers to come in and clean before, in between, and after Sunday worship services, and we're only talking about the sanctuary at that point. So when you look at those surveys, one of the things that became very clear to us is that a number of people were willing to volunteer, which is a blessing that we all have. But most of those folks who were willing to volunteer also identified themselves as being in a category of people that would be considered higher risk. People that if they did get infected with the coronavirus would be in a more dangerous situation than perhaps somebody else. And so part of what the Healthy Church team has to do, keeping in mind that our number one priority is the safety of our congregation, is come up with a way to overcome and get volunteers and put into place a plan and protocols and execution of that plan while dealing with a volunteer pool that maybe doesn't fit the volunteers that we need. So we will continue working and trying to overcome those obstacles.
And we do have some obstacles. We do need the volunteers. I'm sure the biggest question right now on everyone's mind is exactly when will we be able to return to in-person worship at Thalia?
You know, Diane, that is the question that I have been asked the most. I'm sure every other member of the Healthy Church team has heard that question repeatedly. And I wish I could tell you tonight, this is the date that we're going to start. But I don't have a 100% certain answer for when that's going to be. You know, we have seen in the last few weeks as colleges and universities went back to school, where they've had large number of people come back together, and their infection rates have gone up. Some schools, for example, have had to go to online classes only, where they weren't planning that before, and some schools have even sent their students back home. We can't really afford to do that with the congregation that we have here at Thalia. So I don't have a date, but I can tell you that certain things are going to happen before we are ready to go back to in-person worship. And one of the things is going to be that we have every tool, every resource, every volunteer, every check box checked on our plan to be implemented so that it is as safe as we possibly can be when we come back together.
It's really hard to hear that we don't have a specific return date, but I certainly can understand the concerns, and I'm sure that the congregation understands those too, although I'm sure they're disappointed.
Well, Diane, I understand that disappointment, and frankly, I share that frustration. As I told you earlier, the Healthy Church team is made up of long-term members of this church, people who have a love of Thalia in their hearts. We're frustrated too, but safety is our number one concern. And in fact, if I can go back to the surveys that we talked about just for another minute, those surveys told us, again, what the congregation was thinking. And I will tell you that the vast majority of the people who responded to that survey also agreed that now is not the time. They don't feel like we can come back together in large gatherings and be safe right now. In fact, a large percentage of those people also said they won't feel safe until we have a vaccine for COVID-19 readily available before they will be willing to come back to in-person worship here at the church. So it is a frustration. We want to come back. We know other churches have come back, but we're not in a position here right now today to say when that will be.
Mark, do you anticipate changes in how we will worship when we're able to come back to Thalia?
I do. I think change is something that we've all had to deal with in our lives over the last 5 to 6 months, Diane. Change is something that has become commonplace now, and that won't be different when we come back to in-person worship. Some of the things that you're doing in your daily life, I'm sure. You're wearing a mask when you go out. You're social distancing when you go to the grocery store. All of those things will take place here as well. So let me run down some of the protocols that I know will be in place when we come back. First of all, with regard to the sanctuary, we won't be able to have a packed sanctuary anymore. There will become a time when we have a vaccine and everybody's healthy and we don't have to worry that we will, but when we first come back, we're going to have limited number of people in the sanctuary at a time. When those people are in the sanctuary, they're going to have to social distance. You know, that's the new catchphrase now, social distancing. So we're going to have to make sure that those folks are apart from each other. You and I have to be at least 6 feet apart today when we're talking, Diane, so it won't be any different when we're in the sanctuary. Everybody who's in the sanctuary will have to wear a mask and keep it on at all times. That's the only way we can be safe, which means that it will look different for the worship service. One of the things that won't be part of the worship service anymore is singing, congregational singing. We will have music, and we may have soloists, but as a congregation sitting in the pews, we will not be singing hymns like we used to. It's just not safe to do so. So we won't be passing the peace with hugs and handshakes, but we will be with our eyes and with our own spirit. But the thing I want everyone to remember, though it feels different, though it looks and maybe even sounds different, Jesus said, wherever 2 or more of my people are, there I am also. So when we come together to worship, let's not lose sight of the fact that that's what we're there to do, to worship. And we will worship joyously and gratefully, and God will be there with us.
Amen. Do you have any suggestions, or maybe the HCT team has some suggestions on what we should do while we wait for in-person worship to resume?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to keep doing what we've been doing. We need to continue taking part in those Sunday worship services online. We need to keep watching either on Facebook Live or YouTube or any of the other ways that you can get connected to the church. We need to have small groups continue to use the technology. I really believe that the technology that we have now is a God-given gift that helps us overcome some of the obstacles of not being in person. We need to continue using those. The Healthy Church team, for example, meets via Zoom. Other groups that I'm part of meet on Skype. The church is having a push, and we're trying to get everybody to do Google Meets. There are all kinds of technological advances that we have, and I want the church to continue doing those things to get together. And when you do, pray. Prayer is the absolute foundation for everything that we're going to do. Pray for us to continue making advances. Don't lose sight of the fact that we're farther along than we were when we started. There's been advances in the fight against this pandemic. There's been advances in the fight against the coronavirus. I've heard news reports about, advances in a vaccine, for example. One of the things that our congregation told us that they wanted, because they didn't really feel safe, according to those surveys, that it was time to come back in large groups. And most of those folks said that they wouldn't necessarily feel safe coming back until we have a vaccine. So keep praying that we get one. Keep praying that our conference continues to be a connectional conference. Keep praying for the Healthy Church team. Keep praying that God will reveal his plan to us and show us and give us the wisdom to understand what it is he would have us doing. But most of all, keep meeting and being the church.
Yes, indeed. Are there any other ideas on how Thalia can remain focused on Christ during a time like this?
There are, Diane, and I think that what you just said is the key to getting past this pandemic at all. Remaining focused on Christ. That should be what we do as disciples and trying to disciple other people. That should be our daily activity, is remaining focused on Christ. There's a lot of opportunities that have come along. As I said before, I think that the gifts that we've been given to use the online technologies to get together, those are really opportunities. Opportunities for small groups to meet in person, not face-to-face, not physically together, but to meet in person, to have a conversation, to have a holy conversation about either studying the Bible or whatever's going on in their lives. And there's an emphasis on that. I've talked to Pastor Joe about the term he uses is micro-churches, because each one of those small groups can be a church in and of itself. And when I say church or micro-church, what I mean is a group that provides fellowship, that provides support, that prays for each other, a group that gets together and is the body of Christ in a smaller setting, not just a large Sunday worship service. So some of our groups have already been meeting virtually. Other groups are starting back up. I know Lois Grubb is going to be starting up a women's Bible study. And those types of opportunities are going to remain whether we come back on Sunday mornings for worship services or not. And I would encourage everybody in the congregation to take advantage and use the tools that we do have. Use the technology that we do have. to come together and continue to do what we started doing before the pandemic. There was an emphasis in this congregation that started at the end of last year called #MakeChurchAVerb. You know, we were told to go live our faith, to get outside these walls. Well, we've been forced outside the walls now, Diane, without question. So make church a verb. And do that in this setting means still put into practice your daily routine of studying the Word, living out your faith, connecting with people. It may not be in person, but you can still connect with people and show them the love of Christ. This is an opportunity. You know, one of the small groups that I'm in is my Sunday school class. We've been able to meet several times during the pandemic. We actually have new members people I had never met before. This is an opportunity and a new way for us to spread the love of Christ. But if we do that, back to your question, focus on Christ, we can make church a verb.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mark. Please keep tuning in on Sunday mornings to worship online with Pastor Joe and the worship team. Follow Thalia United Methodist Church on social media to keep updated on the news. Please visit our thaliaumc.org website and register your email address to receive monthly newsletters and other important information.